Thank you very much, Mr. Blue, and I will have some questions for you in a moment, but first, thank you for the announcement. We appreciate it, and I'll have some further follow-up here in a second. First, Mr. Rausch, I say Mr. Rausch, but it's Mr.
Rauch.
Rauch, okay. I have a friend that has the exact same spelling, that's why, Rauch. Let me ask you, and I was again pleased to hear Mr. Blue consulted with NOAA, GSA. Can you tell me how your agency interacts with GSA in these regulation rewrites and kind of give me a sense of how your engagement?
As Mr. Blue said, we were not originally involved in the process. For the past few months, we have been in consultation with GSA, working with them on the revision. I think we are excited about working with GSA more in the future as they continue to monitor this active process. I think that's a partnership that is going to grow. But we were not originally involved in that.
Were you aware when GSA was developing their guidelines? Were you folks aware that they were doing it, and there was just no engagement from you, or were you not aware of that?
I was not aware. We were not aware.
Okay. Let me ask you the broader step. As you know, we're in the reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act at this time, and we're starting hearings and we're doing listening sessions. It seems, you know, and I understand these. Like MSC, they're mad at me, and I get that. They're mad at Alaska, I get that. You know, they don't like the fact that we don't want to use their certification because honestly, they charge a lot of money, and I'm not sure what the full value is. And there's inconsistency. We have different organizations. Monterey Bay is another one, and we can kind of go through the list. Doesn't it make sense that as we redraft and tweak the Magnuson-Stevens Act and reauthorization, that we if fisheries meet the sustainability level by our standards, and they're rebuilt stocks and they're sustainable as we classify them, isn't that the ultimate test of sustainability rather than these third-party NGOs? Why would they trump everything we do? Or should they?
Well, first, let me agree with your statement that we are required to manage this sustainably. When people ask me why is it sustainable, I can tell them why. It is a transparent process that is adaptive. It's not a point in time. You have to have a system that will constantly evaluate the fishery and adjust as appropriate. That's what we have with the federal system. That's what the state of Alaska has for salmon. So I would agree with you that federally managed and in certain cases state-managed fisheries are the pinnacle of sustainability. That being said, private industries can market their product as they see fit in this country under certain laws, and the federal government, I currently do not have the authority to weigh in that balance. I can articulate
Yeah, no, I understand that. But in your testimony, you had indicated that there were, for example, times when industry comes to you and they ask for a letter of probably a certain type of fish stock, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And is it sustainable, or how do you declare it? And you respond, correct?
Correct.
So in an indirect way, I don't want to call that certification, but you are identifying which stocks are sustainable by actions that you can show by scientific evidence, not just in that moment in time, but over time, right?
Correct. Yes.
So if in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, I get that, you know, private sector can go get the good housekeeping seal and all that stuff, but the consumers today demand more and more what their product is, where it comes from. They want to at least understand it. They don't necessarily want us to restrict the purchase of it because they want those choices, and I totally agree with that. But doesn't it make sense if you're already doing some letters that just making it more clear in the legislation and reauthorization that when that request is made and you say it, then it is sustainable. Now, there are some stocks that someone might send a letter to or ask you, and you might say, well, they're not sustainable yet. They're in rebuilding status, right? That may be one of the situations that might occur.
Well, we would argue that even a rebuilding fishery is sustainable because the catch that we allow.
That's right, because you have a scientifically level catch.
Right, and I want to be respectful to the two senators to your side because red snapper is in technically rebuilding mode, and we would argue it is very sustainable, and you can have harvest and sale of that, and people should be eating red snapper.
Right. And long-term ability.
Yes.
Okay. Let me pause you because my time's about to run out. I want to make sure everyone has some time here. Mr. Booth, first, always give you the positive before I kind of give you a little push here. Thank you for the announcement today. Timing is everything. We appreciate that more than you can imagine. But honestly, it shouldn't have taken this hearing, or as well as letters that we've sent and conversation that's been out in the press on this issue. How did GSA fail in this effort to connect with federal agencies that manage fisheries when you're developing standards for our contractors to purchase, or our agencies to purchase fisheries on a sustainable? How did that happen? I mean,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't want, I want to move forward, but I want to understand this, because this is a huge issue that has caused a huge stir, as you can imagine, in my state especially, I'm sure in my friends from Florida, in the sense of what is sustainable now. How do you define it? So how did that happen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We share the concern of the subcommittee. We've reviewed our policy process and our interagency coordination process. The fact that NOAA was not coordinated during the development of these guidelines, they were not policy, they were guidelines intended to be helpful, was an oversight on our part. We've recognized that, and we are in the process of correcting our interagency coordination with partner agencies for the issuance of such guidelines in the future.
Let me ask, how will you, and again, I think the guideline with this revision is important because you've taken out the third-party certification reference in any form, and as well as making it clear. How will you make sure the agencies that do the maybe the Park Service or maybe any other agency that is doing contracted services, understand when they write these RFPs, this is the standard that they should use? How are you doing that now to make sure, as we know, and I think I've just heard the Park Service is now going to follow your guideline, which is also good news we hear today. So, but tell me how you're going to ensure that happens. Because I mean, I can tell you how they know it's happening now, because we've made it very public. And I'm sure they read the papers and realize, oh my gosh, what's this all about? Now they're doing it because you've changed the guidelines. But how are we going to make sure every agency understands these guidelines for contracting of their services?
Just so I understand the question, you mean getting the word out about the
Yes.
change guidelines?
Yeah, so they don't put into their RFPs suddenly third-party certification requirements, because that's what they remember from the old RFPs or the guidelines. How are they going to know what the new guidelines are and make sure that they follow them?
It's important to note that the third-party certification, they were not requirements, but they were reference material for the vendors as they were crafting their proposals.
Right.
But we can make it and will make it clear through various channels that we have as the leader in the federal acquisition workforce to federal departments and agencies what the new guidelines say. We can also make it clear to our vendor community when they submit their proposals that these guidelines have been changed.
Okay, let me pause there, and I'll turn to Senator Rubio for his questions.
Well, I see. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And if I can add to that, we have a piece of legislation pending on called Safe Seafood Bill, which does exactly what you're talking about, because customers today want really to understand what they're buying, where it's coming from. I know in Alaska we have over $500 million worth of Russian crab they call Alaska crab, and it's impacting our industry dramatically in the negative way. So you're absolutely right. So we do have a bill pending on that. We also have two other bills that passed out of this committee we're very excited about, 269 and 267, which is all about pirate fishing, and in honor of Senator Inouye, who led that charge when I got here and before. So we're hopefully, maybe Senator Nelson will put a little push on who we need to push on to get these to the table. So we'll look forward to that. Senator Heinrich. Thank you very much. Thanks for that good testimony. Let me, a vote has been called, but we have time for a round of questions, so we'll go through those. I'll do 5-minute rounds. First, let me start with Ms. Moreland. Stephanie, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about ASME's Responsible Fisheries Management program. Let me ask you, as that program gets finalized and developed, how would you compare that to MSC's process? In other words, is it equal in ensuring what standards they're looking for? Is it more robust? Is it, kind of how do you measure the two? If someone was to say, I want that labeling or that certification, how would we compare? Thank you very much. Thanks for that good testimony. Let me, a vote has been called, but we have time for a round of questions, so we'll go through those. I'll do 5-minute rounds. First, let me start with Ms. Moreland. Stephanie, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about ASME's Responsible Fisheries Management program. Let me ask you, as that program gets finalized and developed, how would you compare that to MSC's process? In other words, is it equal in ensuring what standards they're looking for? Is it more robust? Is it, kind of, how do you measure the two? If someone was to say, I want that labeling or that certification, how would we compare?
Senator Begich, thank you for the question. And I just want to first clarify that we're not just getting the program up and running. It is running. It's ready to go.
Right.
And we have new news as of this week that chain of custody process is also now ISO accredited, and ASME will be rolling out information on that. So we have a full program that's ready to go and being used now. Relative to MSC, I think we have just a fundamental difference in view of what the appropriate role of a certification body is. We see certification and verification that sustainability criteria are being met as different than governing fisheries. And as you know, in Alaska, we have a very robust, transparent public process informed by science.
Go ahead.
That process, we feel, is being undermined by a separate certification body that continues to change what expectations are for defining sustainability. And one last point, the program RFM that ASME helped put up is actually a measure of sustainability. So it uses third-party process to verify that sustainability criteria are being met. MSC will issue conditional certification so that a fishery may not be performing at a sustainable level today, but puts in place a plan to get there. MSC label may be used in that case. Our system would not do that.
So let me make sure I'm clear on that. So if you have a fisheries within Alaska in our state that is not, it's on a plan but not yet clear if it's going to be sustainable, because not all plans come out becoming sustainable. You could have failure in the plan over a period of years. That would not meet the standard that you now have in place.
Correct.
MSC, it would meet the standard.
I can't speak for how or whether it would meet the standard, but I am aware that they issue conditional certification, meaning that there need to be changes to the fishery to achieve sustainability.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Let me, if I can, Mr. Rice, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the conversations I've had with Walmart, not only me personally, but my staff and the work. And I do agree that there's a lot of effort you have done from a variety of efforts in renewable energy and LEED standards and just all the things trying to make your operation better, as every business achieves and tries to achieve. So thank you for doing that. But, one area I want to and I follow up on, and you made the comment, and that is you're open for looking at these issues. I guess my question is, you just heard a brief description, not only in the testimony, but also in the question from Ms. Moreland on what we're doing in Alaska. The question I always have is, especially with government agencies and with private sector, is when people make those statements, what's the time, how do you measure when you can get to that decision to say, yes, we're still buying Alaska seafood, but also we now accept or reject, depending on outcome, this new standard that Alaska is using for their fisheries? How will you have a definitive timetable to get there? Then I have another quick question.
Thank you so much for the question. We've actually engaged the Sustainability Consortium, as we said in our testimony, in working through them. We understand that they're on a timeline that we will get to an answer very quickly. This is not redoing work. It's not developing a new standard. It's really giving a lot of organizations, but Walmart also, the confidence and comfort to know that what standards and certifications lead to sustainable fisheries and what don't. That process has kicked off and is underway, and we believe that they will have a set of principles and criteria that can be used to evaluate those standards by the end of this calendar year, so by the end of December. In the meantime, we continue to to source seafood from Alaska, and we're confident that we'll be able to continue to source seafood from Alaska in the years ahead.
Do you feel the conversations have been productive in helping Walmart understand kind of our process in Alaska and the more exhaustive process that we utilize?
Absolutely. It's been extremely helpful, the engagement and the dialogue we've been in. And again, we encourage ASME and other experts from certification standards bodies and industry to engage in this process to make sure that the criteria and principles that are developed are robust and do lead to sustainable fisheries.
Let me ask you one other quick one. I have one other one that I'll turn right quickly to Senator Blumenthal, and that is, I know, and it sounds like, we have a challenge between, and we always seem to bring up Russia here, but Russia snow crab